Do you want a garden that is both beautiful and beneficial for local wildlife? Well, stay tuned because in this video, we're going to dive into our top 10 tips for creating a stunning native plant garden that's also easy to maintain. I'm Dan from the Frog Pond Veg Patch. If you're new to gardening and you're looking for ways to start with native plants, you're definitely in the right place. So let's explore how to make your garden a thriving, eco-friendly space. Native plants are adapted to your local climate and soil. They require less water and fewer chemicals while providing essential support for local wildlife. And let's talk for a minute about native versus non native plants. Non native plants have been introduced into an area, but they do not necessarily harm the ecosystem and can coexist with native and other non native plants. Now, invasive species do cause harm, typically by outcompeting natives or hybridizing with them, thus decreasing that native plant population. And this impacts not only that native plant, but also the other native species that depend on it. And that leads me into tip number 2, research native plants in your area. Find out which native plants thrive in your region by consulting local gardening resources or plant societies or university extensions. You can use guidebooks to learn more about native plants, and you can do research online. Here in New England, we have the Native Plant Trust, which is a really great source of knowledge about plants that are native to our region here in New England. So once you've learned a bit more about your area and the types of plants that are native, it's time to start gardening. And tip number 3 is to start simple. Begin with a straightforward design or just a few native plants in containers. This approach is manageable and will help you gain confidence in being able to grow these plants. You can have a simple garden plan. You can tackle just a small area, and you would be amazed at how many plants you can get to grow even in a small area. If you don't have a lot of space, gardening in containers is another great option. You can create a wonderful display with native plants following the traditional rule of thumb of having a filler, a spiller, and a thriller, which basically means you want to have one plant that fills out the pot, another plant that flows over, cascades over the pot, and something that is a centerpiece that has height and has a wow factor to it. Tip number 4 is about using native plants as ground covers. By incorporating ground covers into your garden, you can fill out spaces around other plants and use that ground cover to suppress weeds and enhance the overall appearance of your garden. You can bring interest even at the smallest level of your garden. Here in New England, some of the native plants that can make good ground cover include wild strawberry, creeping phlox, creeping dewberry, violets, just to name a few. Tip number 5 is about water retention. Where you aren't using ground cover plants, you can use organic mulch to retain moisture, regulate the soil temperature, and build up soil health over time. This is a really simple yet effective way to help support your native plants. There's different kinds of mulch that you can use, and I recommend trying to find a source that is native to your area, whether that is grass clippings or leaves, pine bark, compost from a local source. And you can also consider composting in your yard, taking the yard debris, leaves and things like that, and having as part of your yard where you can make your own mulch. You're keeping and retaining those nutrients on your property and building up the soil health where you have your garden beds. Whenever we go to the garden center, we're always looking for that plant that is going to have that wow factor, that's going to stand out in our garden. You can do this with native plants. You can select native plants that offer eye-catching blooms or interesting seed head, colored foliage, different textures, different heights, things to add color and visual appeal to your garden. In our area here in New England, we like to use goldenrod, native lupine, different asters, boncet, sunflowers, which are helianthus, and they provide height, they provide color interest. You really can have a lot of fun finding those impactful, showy native plants that you can use in your garden. Tip number 7 is think about including wildlife areas in your garden. You can enhance your garden by adding features such as a pond, a bird bath, or a bug hotel. These elements provide habitat and they attract beneficial wildlife. They will attract pollinators, they will attract the predatory insects that will help reduce the pests in your garden. These elements not only enhance the habitat but also attract beneficial wildlife to your garden. So if you've got questions about how to get started and what plants to use, tip number 8 is to ask for help at a local nursery. So if you're just getting started, maybe you want to build a starter kit for yourself of native plants that are going to thrive in your area. Think about where there is sun and shade in your garden, what type of soil you have. Is it sandy? Is it clay? How much water do you plan on, or are you able to give the area? Is it in a boggy, wet part of your yard? Is it hot and dry? With this information, you can consult with your local nurseries to help create a native plant kit suited to your garden conditions. And they can certainly help set you up for success. Tip number 9 is embracing seasonal change. Choose a mix of native plants that offer seasonal interest. Look for plants that flower at different times so that you can have flowering plants early in the spring all the way through fall. Look for plants that change and evolve over the season. Maybe the leaves change color. Maybe they have interesting seed heads that can give some interest to your winter garden as well. Starting with native plants doesn't have to be expensive. Depending on the plant, you might be able to direct seed that, or it can be great for a winter sowing project where you use milk jugs to create mini greenhouses where you can start seeds over winter. And so that way they have a bit of a leg up when it comes to spring. And then you can divide out the seedlings and get a lot of plants for not a lot of money compared to buying plugs or buying full-size plants. And as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't need to take a lot of space either. You don't need a large property in order to be able to have and support a native plant garden. And for finding seeds, there's a lot of great resources online. It's getting easier and easier to search for seeds that are, for plants that are native to your area. So I hope these tips inspire you to start your own native plant garden. For us, we have been working towards incorporating more native plants, as many native plants as we can. If you want to know more, if you're excited to dive deeper into native plant gardening, you can check out our next video on milk jug seed starting that I mentioned. It's a fantastic way to get your seeds germinating and growing with minimal effort. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe and share your gardening journey or questions in the comments below. Thanks for joining me, and happy gardening.